Ladies and gentlemen, Andor, Season 1, Episode 4, Aldhani. I do apologize for being a little bit late. As usual, I'm having trouble sleeping lately, but what's really funny is I had enough time to cover watch the episode, take notes, and then jot down. And then I kept having to pause the episode to not only take notes, but to cross-reference and verify a few things. In fact, I happen to have an org chart of the Imperial Security Bureau right here on my other screen, which we'll get to in a minute. Also, thank you, Inosians, very, very much for the sub. I do not know, Act. Depends on how fast we go through things. I'm playing this very much by ear. So, interestingly, we're heading out. We get right into it, of course. Ship doesn't appear to have a droid. Did you catch that? Just the bot in the computer, which means it actually does have a droid. It's just the droid's body is the ship. Now, that's something we've established as possible several times throughout the course of this franchise, but most people don't do, probably because it's actually kind of inhumane when you think about it. Also, the ship itself is tweaked and custom, which is also not the kind of thing I would consider surprising. So Cassian's story about Mimban it's nice, it's a nice scene. It's a nice thing. It's a nice little speech he gives. The Empire had us fighting each other, and we all almost died. The only reason I was... and the other guy immediately jumps in and is like, yeah, no. It's a smokescreen. Which is doubly interesting because Luthen cuts right to the heart of things immediately. You lived because you ran. There's that selfish streak again. Everything about this scene is so amazing that I feel silly commenting on it. Everything is right there on screen. His speech is powerful. But when it comes down to it and what he's asked, he cuts straight to the heart of the matter very quickly and efficiently. This is big risk. It's big danger. It's a big reward. He is offering him quintuple the pay he was offered earlier. It also cuts right to the heart of what we've seen of Cassian so far. Oh, of course he cares about his mother, and Bix, and Brasso. But at his core, so far, Cassian is two things. Selfish and defiant. So, you get to really screw with the Empire, and you get a big payday. Of course Cassian says yes. In fact, if anything, he's probably so hesitant because it is such a good offer, and in all the right ways. Yeah, Luthen has absolutely no time to waste. Sympathize. Lovely shot of Coruscant. Did you catch it's the New York shot? For those of you not aware, I'm actually not sure if that's what it's officially called, but that's what I usually hear it referred to as. There's a common type of shot that people do when establishing a city, usually done in New York, here in the United States, where the shot is directly down. The camera's going straight down and you just do a passing shot over the cityscape. It's a common thing. I'm sure you've seen it in dozens of movies, usually for real-life cities. But I bring that up because that doesn't count, Plutonia. I bring that up because it is effective in getting across scale and scope and all that, and it's less visually interesting by being more visually useful, if that makes any sense. It's less pretty. Like if you look at a panorama shot or like a general two-thirds shot of a cityscape, that can be pretty, right? Seeing the skyline, usually the sun framed in some way. But if you do the straight down, it doesn't look as pretty, but it's a lot more visually interesting. More information's being conveyed. More is being presented. And it's like, oh, okay. It also does one other thing that's actually kind of quietly brilliant. I've been noticing the whole show has been doing this, but this episode in particular really nails this point. It makes Coruscant feel like an actual city. It makes it feel like a real place that's actually there. I bring that up because, no offense to the prequel trilogy, Coruscant did not feel like a real place in the prequel trilogy. Now, there's a couple of exceptions to that, and I don't want to diminish the incredible amount of work that was put into the CGI of the prequel trilogy, which varies in quality, but Lord knows the artists were doing their damnedest. But these kind of shots, and there are several of these, make this feel like a place, Like this is an actual location you can go and visit. And this is a good time as any to mention something. And yes, I've noticed a lot of the brutalist architecture on display, especially when we zoom the camera in a little bit more. Like when we see Deputy going to visit his mother, for example. That apartment complex. I'll talk more about that when we get there, but that's a good example of that brutalist architecture. Or the spaceport, which is also when the Deputy comes in. So, that's true, you watched Phantom Menace just yesterday. Everyone, this is Mr. Red. Mr. Red just watched the Phantom Menace. Hi, Mr. Red. Sorry. I mean, yes, it's just London. It's just... God, I was just about to look something up. I lost it. Doesn't matter. I love the shots. I love the visual presentation. I love what they're doing with it. I love that bot. That bot is so amazing. I hope the person who made that bot, like, trips into a sewer hole and dies. So... so then we see the ISB. I have to admit, and I mean this with total sincerity, I didn't know the ISB was in this show. I just was commenting on it because the Big Deputy Boy is just... You saw how it happened if you were watching the Ruminations. It just so naturally came into the conversation because we were talking about Compnor. Because Deputy Guy was so Compnor. And we started discussing it. I find myself wondering if if Imperial Intelligence still exists in this setting. In the AU, I should clarify. And I'm going to explain that briefly for those of you not aware of the distinction. So, in the EU, the ISB was the political tool of thugs. They were less competent, they were less capable, they were primarily an arm of Compnor, which is a political entity. Imperial Intelligence was the intelligence agency who was concerned with doing their job and doing it properly. They were the competent and capable ones who were on top of things. And the two sides constantly butted heads, because both of them hated each other. It was actually one of the specific reasons why, if you've played Tor or watched me play Tor, the Sith Intelligence Agency is constructed the way it is, because that was modeled after Imperial Intelligence from the EU. So you definitely see those vibes in a lot of the Star Wars EU bits, and it's a recurring element in quite a few books. It shows up in the X-Wing series. It's something that pops its head in even in the original Thrawn trilogy. So... excuse me. So yeah, I do think that based on the way they talk about it throughout the course of the episode, that this is Imperial Intelligence, and Imperial Intelligence just doesn't exist anymore. But it is interesting that they've kind of transitioned into that particular directive. I don't know, just food for thought. It was just something I was chewing on right as the ISB showed up. So... Then they start discussing it, and we see Partagaz, I think was his name. They mention it extremely briefly, and I don't remember how they pronounced it. The guy in charge, right, the major. He's kind of immediately good. Like, it's really disturbing how good he is immediately. As a character, I mean, obviously he's a horribly evil jackass. Partagaz? Too many A's. I love the way he talks. I love how crisp and efficient he is with his words. I love how no-nonsense he is. I love how competent he comes across. There's this bit where the guy's like, I'm looking for more funding for my department. For what? And the person is like thrown, right? The person is thrown by the question. To increase surveillance, of course. Are you being intentionally vague? And I love that. I love that immediate reaction. What are you doing? No, I'm asking for what you're actually going to spend the money on. And I'm sorry, speaking as a manager, can I just say relatable? What do you want this budget increase? Well, I want to increase our profits in this sector. Okay, but why do you want this budget increase? Well, I need to get more assets. Okay, what are you buying? Give me a receipt, you jackass. Sorry. It does, Ganas. This feels like, obviously this is an establishing scene. This is our first section of all of these people. By the way, interesting first look at the Empire in this entire franchise. You notice that? This is the Empire's first peek in, and it's the frickin' ISB. Anyways, that's for your new yacht. Okay, you're fired. Jesus Christ, Oculus, really? Almost assuredly. So, first of all, thank you, Oculus. Do you want me? How do you want me to write it down when it comes to the paperwork on my end? Funny you say that because I did too. Just Oculus. I'll continue writing down Oculus. I'll have to do another find replace in my head. I have a lot of those. I do appreciate your support, and I'm sorry you're having to deal with that. Yeah, it's just they've been able to do that for a while, actually, Narlex. That's the problem. So immediate. Sorry, let's get back to this. Immediate visual distinction of the Empire. We've seen locals, right? Great visual presentation. The town, the mining, the ship breaking, right? The junkyard, and then we saw corporate, and corporate was still dirty, right? Corporate was still rough. Corporate was still like broken down and dealing with crap. I even got a freaking highlight out, or not a highlight, excuse me, a short out that Mr. Red clipped about just how pathetic corporate is. And then we see the ISB. We see the Empire for the first time, and they are visually completely distinct from everything we've seen to date. And that's going to show up several times here. And there's this wonderful bit. So I didn't even catch her name. Lieutenant Lady is there. So, and Partagaz is making his rounds, being like, "What's up? How are things? Tell me everything, blah, blah, blah." And there's this wonderful tidbit where she has this expression. She does some good everyone does good facial acting in this episode, but she does a really, really good bit of facial acting here. So she's like, and yeah, her voice, oh my God, immediate. Yes, of course, we are blah, 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 blah. And she gives the textbook answer from the textbook. And his response is, and I did bother to write this down. Yes, that is verbatim from the ISB mission statement, and it is wrong. And there's this wonderful bit where the camera shifts to her face for just a second, and she shifts from being like smug, I just got a one-up brownie point during the meeting, to like what I can only refer to as shock. And then, security is an illusion. You want security? Call the Navy. Launch a regiment of troopers. We are healthcare providers. We treat sickness. We identify symptoms. We locate germs, whether they arise from within or have come from the outside. The longer we wait to identify a disorder, the harder it is to treat the disease. Damn! And everything about that scene is fantastic. Do I even need to explain it? Let's go down the list. First of all, this is the Galactic Empire. Kind of like at its height, for lack of a better way to put that. There is absolutely no reason he couldn't have her fired or even executed. Or worse, for this tiny breach and misconduct. That is how the Galactic Empire operates, especially at its height. He doesn't. He reprimands her. And then he corrects her. And then he gives his whole speech. And the really horrible part is his speech has a degree of accuracy to it. Because, as he says, security is an illusion. And I hate to say this, but speaking as someone who has worked in security, that is a true statement. All there are barriers to entry, but there's always an entry. All that matters is how determined they are to get what you want. As a security specialist, your job to defend your particular thing, whether it be physical or digital, is to make that barrier as high as possible without being too much of an inconvenience to you and your customers, so that the people who want to do malfeasance or robbery don't think it's worth the bother. That's security. And you can see how that is just an illusion, right? You lock the door. Is that going to prevent someone from breaking your house? Probably. In fact, it's going to prevent a lot of people from doing it. But if someone wants to, are they going to break into your house? Yes. You want security? You got to go a different direction. So, his speech is fascinating. And then he gets past that and gets to the next thing. We are healthcare providers. And that gets into some other messed up things. Because the way he speaks, this is so beautifully written. We treat sickness. We identify symptoms. We locate germs. I can't be the only one who noticed that he just referred to people as diseases. Yeah, white blood cells. Yeah, crime and criminals. That's social disorder. It really says so much about exactly what he's thinking and how his mentality is. How the mentality of true believers in the Galactic Empire really operate. Because you've noticed that's another trend, right? Cassian, I cannot be the only one who noticed this. Cassian doesn't believe in anything. Himself, whatever he can get, Defiance, of course, and the three people who really matter to him. And that's kind of it. Cassian is not a believer in anything. But Deputy Boy, he's a true believer. Mosk, true believer. Partagaz? So, not yet, Porno. We're not there yet. Also, I do have to mention something that Plutonia mentioned too, because it bears repeating. Because he's not just referring to people as germs, he is actually referring to ideas as disease. And the moment you get into thought police, Partagaz. They only said it like once, and it flew by. I hate this. They didn't even name Lieutenant Lady. Or if they did, I completely missed it. They still haven't name-dropped Deputy Guy. Yeah, I'm just going to call him the Director, even though he's a Major. I actually caught his rank. He's a Major. But anyways, Deidre Miro. Sure, that's already gone, because I don't know how they pronounce it. I really, really love this scene and how absolutely quietly horrifying it is. This is what I would consider proper horror, for lack of a better way to put that. This isn't, like, imagine this same type of scene, but instead the whole room is organic, right? Because we know that if they use organic tech, they're evil. That's a very quick shorthand in all of fiction, game, show, movie, book. So imagine it's this big organic room. Blood is seeping off the walls and pus, and there's like this kind of pulsating heartbeat in the background, right? And they slurp in, and they're like, yes, we are the evil empire. And we'll call them the Vaughn. Perfect, I like it. And imagine the same construction of the scene. Don't even have to change the dialogue that much, right? But let me say that previous speech a little bit differently. Security is an illusion. You are security. Call the Navy. That's a regiment of troopers. We are healthcare providers. We treat sickness. We identify symptoms. We locate germs, whether they arise from a winner. And you see how different that vibe is, right? How different it would come across. And we'd all be like, oh my God, these people are so evil. But instead, this is an office. This is just a meeting on a Tuesday. And that's what makes it so wonderfully horrifying. Because something that they don't do enough in Star Wars, as weird as that sounds, is get across how banal the Galactic Empire really was. I said that quote earlier, and I'm going to say this quote again. You know what I remember most about the rise of the Empire? How quiet it was. Also, apparently they need to get a little bit more security because they are having an increase in construction projects going to Scarif. Huh. Transition back to Luthen. And Luthen, the banality of evil. Yeah, it's just filler. That's just filler. Don't worry about that. So he gives him a Kyber stone celebrating the uprising against the Rakata invaders. Now, can I say really, really quickly here? that right there is how you do references in something like this. Can I just say that? Is that something I could just lay out there? Because what they tend to do, especially when they're doing it badly, looking at you, Solo, is they'll be like, hey, like imagine this is one of the more worse Star Wars projects, and they're like, this here is a Rakata stone, and then the camera changes like this, and the crystal. I don't really have a prop for this. I don't have anything I can dangle. We'll use my microcloth. And the crystal is just like dangling there right in front of the camera, right? This was celebrating the successful uprising against the Rakatan invaders. And then there would be like a musical cue, right? Doo-doo-doo, doo-doo-doo, as the camera's like rotating around the crystal. Then he snatches around, and then he'd go on with his speech. In other words, there's something metaphorical that I've talked about many times, where someone will just stare at the camera and say, hey, do you remember this? And honestly, obviously that's a gradient. There's a gap there. It's not binary, but I tend to hate it when they drop too far into member berries. Instead, it's just there. It's just this quick and dirty. Yeah, hey, yeah, this was something that was this. Don't take less than 50,000 for it. And he doesn't even pause in his sentence. It's just a quick and dirty, here you go. And because the scene is so much more about the crystal and its down payment to secure Cassian's loyalty, because you know that's why he did it, it makes so much sense why that's here. This is one of the best ways, I noticed, Uthor, trust me. This is one of the best ways that good works will do these kind of references. It's not about the reference. It's about what's happening now that the reference adds to. Actually, if you're paying attention, we just covered something like this. Season 7 of Clone Wars, the last 4 episodes, did several aspects of this as well, where it's about this. Whatever's happening now, the characters that are now, the presence that's now, the plot that's now. The reference is just there helping to add additional groundwork for the moment that's now. So, we noticed the Rakata, we noticed the KOTOR reference, that's cool. But the scene is about making sure to ensure Cassian's loyalty to do this one job. Yeah, exactly. That is very valuable. Even his little tidbit. You know, don't take less than 50,000 for this. But remember, it's worth more to me. I'm going to want that back. And the fact that he specifically name drops that it's Kyber crystals, that's another bit of significance, which, again, only really means something if you know what you're talking about. So Cassian, there's this wonderful bit where Cassian actually glances at the controls, and you know he's thinking about running, cutting and running. I mean, he does have that crystal. And then the droid that is the ship looks back and says, can I help you? Nah, I'm good. Oh, it totally does, Cashel, right? It is. Absolutely, Huthor. This is valuable. Okay, cool. That's all we really need to know here. So then Luthen has a great scene with Vel. I caught her name. In fact, I caught all of their names because they actually have an introduction scene. Have you noticed there hasn't... One of the reasons I've been having issues with names in this show is because they don't mention names very often. Now, that's fine. Most people do that, right? Like in normal conversation, you don't say, hello, Raximus, the person that I know. How is your day going here? Right? Like, I don't do that. It's because, you know, he's Rax. It's like, sup, dude? Rax is like, sup? And we can have a whole conversation without ever saying each other's names once. That's pretty normal, right? But we have an introduction scene because you need to meet the crew because this is a heist arc. So we have a perfect way to go ahead and be like, boop, 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 right? And of course, one of the ways, and everyone in chat said this before I got there, but I like to do things in order. Excuse me. Is it's humanizing. You cannot tell me it's on accident that they've been going out of their way to not share Deputy's name for the most part. Now, I did catch they mentioned his last name. But still, 4 episodes in, and they haven't really talked about Deputy's name, because Deputy's name doesn't matter yet. He's Deputy. Or at least he was. I actually imagine, since he's still on camera and still going to be a character, and now he's lost his job, now is when they're going to drop his name, because now they're trying to actually add to the humanization of the character. This is my presumption, because that's what I would do. I would be very strategic with these kind of name drops. Yeah, I refuse to name Stalker Guy. Screw him. It does suck that he's dead. Like, you shouldn't be murdered. Because that's what happened there. You shouldn't be murdered, especially not by a corpo cop. Rent-a-cop, excuse me, below a cop. Because you got drunk one night and made a mistake. But screw him. Anyways, so, there's this really, really wonderful tidbit. Death by cop for no reason. Just... There's this wonderful scene between Luthen and Vel. Look at me! He's been... God, I love Skarsgård so much. He's of course talking about that. He's talking in this tone. And he's got what it's usually I refer to when I'm writing as a layer of edge into his voice. Like there's that layer of steel going back there until finally at this actual frustration point, he finally says, "Look at me, you wanted to lead. This is what it comes to. You've got 3 days." Just smashes it down there. This is not actually up for debate at this point. Everything he says here is fantastic. Everything, and the way he says it. If this will tear the team apart, then it's not much of a team, is it? You wanted to lead? You have to pay attention. You have to say, is this going to fall apart? You need to see if it's going to fall apart, and you need to make the call to call it off. This is also when we see what Luthen is and has been after this whole time. It's actually doubly funny because we've known this from the beginning. Everything about his performance has gotten across very clearly what Luthen is after. Because all he really cares about is defiance. I'm calling it right now. He wants to spit in their eye. He wants to stab them in their gut. He wants to be Saw Gerrera. I'm just going to say it that way. But he doesn't have Saw's position or perspective. Saw's out there with partisan fighters, with guns and ships and violence. Luthen's an artifact dealer. Yeah, he's not after the pay. It's not his goal here. So this is just another way to further emphasize his perspective for anybody who happened to not catch that wonderful line. Because I noticed, I mean, you all noticed too, that wonderful line in the previous episode. The way they look down on us. Yeah, he's also about to rob the payroll of an Imperial sector. I actually have a theory about that. I suppose I could talk about that now. Obviously, this is about hurting the Empire. But Luthen is smart. Everything about his portrayal and presentation shows that he's got a brain. And he is, as I've said several times, higher level than most of the people. Yeah, exactly. I think he's trying to stir the pot very deliberately. I think he wants to escalate. I think he wants the Empire to crack down more. Because that's what this is going to do. There's no other possible outcome. He cannot be stupid enough to think otherwise. There's no way Luthen doesn't realize this is going to result in a crackdown. Which is going to result in more frustrations, more irritations, more people willing to push back. More deaths, more violence, more rebellion. That's what I think he's really after here. Remember, this is 5 BBY. Do you remember Rebels, the show? For those of you who haven't seen it. At the beginning of Rebels, most of the rebels, the actual rebel cells, are pathetic. They're individual groups, usually of like just a handful of people. Single digit, right? 5, 6, 8, 10 people. That's not single digit lore. Who run around like metaphorically spray painting the walls, right? Robbing a couple of people, knocking over an Imperial outpost, you know, maybe killing a few stormtroopers. That's it. They're not doing anything at this point historically. But this... yeah, germs. Little germs that the white blood cells are handling effortlessly. So, see if how right or wrong I am about this. Watch, I'm completely off base. So, there's something I was building to last episode, and I didn't really actually properly vocalize it because I kept caught up in everything else that was going on. Incompetence! I kept making a point, the previous Streamination. I kept making a point about the nature of what was happening as the Corpos were cracking down on Ferrix, right? We've got all of this crap going on. They managed to harass an old woman. Yep, okay. And then get pushed out immediately by the crowd. They managed to get one of their own ships destroyed. Probably worth more than the Corpos, honestly. They managed to get several Corpos killed. They managed to make a big mess. You know, a lot of destruction. You know, they managed to kill the only person who actually sold them out. Not that they knew that, of course. I think that's about it. That's all they managed for all their flair and bluster. Everything they did was nothing but incompetent. That's it. That's all they managed. Like, and I kept pointing out every individual point of incompetency. Like, not leaving a guy to defend the ship, for example. Or not locking down the ship. Or splitting up and not properly doing comms check-ins. Or being like, yeah, we got this. But then the moment anything goes wrong, they start panic firing. Yeah, bunch of clowns. Clowns with guns. Some of the most dangerous types of clowns. And trust me, I've seen some dangerous clowns in my time. This is then immediately put into the face of, yeah, bring 12 men just to be prudent. Jesus Christ. This is put immediately into the face of Blevin, I think was his name. The ISB guy. Who, I wish I'd written down his whole speech. In idiocy, ineptitude, and total disengagement for this farce to reach the full apex of incredulous disaster. There's this wonderful bit. So the chief, who I liked, remember, Chief is like, oh, I wasn't even involved. Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Although, actually, what's kind of funny about that is I don't fully blame the Chief for that, because the Chief was off meeting with his Imperial supervisors doing Imperial business. And he actually did smack down on the situation the way he should have. This actually isn't his fault in any way, ironically and weirdly enough. He also left explicit instructions. That's also true. Then we cut to Mosk. Mosk is actually probably my favorite reaction, which is just... And Blevin just looks at him and says, seriously? And goes back down. But Deputy Boy, my favorite reaction is his. Because Deputy Boy doesn't say anything. And Blevin lays it out very clearly, very overtly. You done screwed up, boy. The entire corporate sector is being shut down. The Empire is now walking in to take personal and direct control of the situation. Congratulations. You have lost. But he doesn't say anything, and I just once again want to give praise to the actor who does so much facial acting. In fact, I don't think the deputy says more than one word in this entire episode, and that word is mother. Or hello, mother. He might have said hello, mother. But either way, he doesn't say jack. He's just there. And he's just... God, his facial acting. Love his facial acting. There's this moment... What is there to say? He got his whole corporation shut down. That entire sector, from what they say. I don't mind dialogue. Really. I don't mind narration. Really. But, you know one of the reasons why I have a negative for empty text? It's because of stuff like this, which so clearly demonstrates how much more can be said with proper animation. Just saying. I mean, Deputy Boy works, doesn't it, Act? Obviously, if they had the reference, they could call him Chevert. Chevert. I think I'm pronouncing that right. They did actually mention his last name, which I'm going to continue to ignore for the moment until we have a proper introduction to the guy. But anyways, I love how low tier all of this is still. We've certainly upped our pay grade, right? We've gone up one whole weight class. But there's this tiny little tidbit where Cassian hears something oncoming, rushes to the ground, freaking out, and they're trying very, very hardly to get away from something. And we've officially hit level 1. Because there's a TIE fighter coming. I speak a lot about the power of being down at the ground level when it comes to narratives, to fiction, both in games and in shows, and in movies, and in books. Yeah, one TIE fighter is a substantial threat. That's great. That's great. That's awesome. I love that. I love the idea that a TIE fighter is supposed to be a terrifying threat. And it helps that the TIE fighter is so incredibly audibly distinct, right? It's so hysterical. I mean, how many of you have played any video game that has any kind of space combat in Star Wars? Because I used to play TIE Fighter, along with X-Wing, right? And there are missions where you can knock out like 50, 70 TIEs in a single mission. Just, One TIE Fighter being a threat, I love that. Yeah, TIEs are treated as the cheap trash jokes, as they should be for if you're much higher tier. Star Wars, I've noticed this in the AU especially. The EU played with this, but the AU has really been coming into this tier concept. I noticed this in Rogue One. I noticed this in Solo. I noticed this in Rebels. They really like to showcase how many different tiers there are and how those tiers can interact with each other. I mean, I came up with the term Krennic because of Rogue One, for God's sakes. Random observation. I mean, wouldn't that make sense, Huthor? Yeah, patrol quotas. You know they have patrol quotas. We know that there is such a thing as arrest quotas and detainment quotas. Yeah, there's the small fish, and then there's the plankton down there. Anyways, I'm getting a little bit off topic. I just wanted to comment on the scene. So, we cut to ISB Lady, and she's playing Yennefer, and she's playing at internal politics and jurisdiction, trying to claim her Starpath unit is justification for moving in on Blevin sector. Okay, we'll come back to that. And this is a scene. I love Skarsgård so much as an actor. How many of you, I'm going to spoil something, okay? This is going to sound weird because I like to avoid unrelated spoilers, but I want to use a comparison. How many of you have seen Iron Man 3? I think I could say this without spoiling, but there's an actor in Iron Man 3 who I suddenly can't think of the name of. The actor's name, the real actor's name. Oh, God. Someone help. What's his name? Yeah, the guy who plays the Mandarin. Kingsley, thank you. Ben Kingsley. Great actor, by the way. You can really tell the upper crust of acting. Because I've talked about this before. When you get to the really, really good actors, it gets down to like fractions of a % of increase in acting quality. But Ben Kingsley nails that so hard because he has to play two extremely different roles, and he nails both of them and the transition between the two fantastic. And that's what Skarsgård does here. There's this amazing moment where there's this fantastic moment where Skarsgård pulls down a thing, washes his face for a second, puts on the wig, get the wig going, and we see jewelry, lots of jewelry, golden jewelry, violet and like lavender looking clothes, very loose, very rich looking fabrics. And even everything about like his body language starts changing, the way he's physically standing, the way he moves his hands. A lot of people talk with their hands. Most people talk with their hands. Anybody who's watched me for any period of time knows that I talk with my hands constantly. It's an old joke. If you ever want to shut me up, just bind my hands together. But most people actually talk with their hands, whether they mean to or not. And so most people also, to carry that thought to its logical conclusion, talk with their body language. They convey as they're doing this, right? And if you've been paying attention, Luthen's body language has been very this. Not like unmoving, but very, very calculated movements as he moves like this. There's like the harshness to how he does things and very controlled in this nature. And he just shifts into this kind of almost wavy thing, right? Just this kind of... And there's it's such a gap. And he even fakes the smile. And then there's just this very clear look of disgust on his face as he walks forward, having moved into the direction. I love it. I love it so much. So then we get a little bit of exposition. There's actually a lot of exposition in this episode, which they slide in neatly enough that I'm sure most people didn't even really properly notice it. Because it's all about Vel explaining a lot of this crap, or actually the whole team really, explaining a lot of this crap to the newbie. There's always the newbie in the heist, right? Whether it's Han or Cassian, you gotta explain this crap. So we find out that this planet was a really, really good distribution hub. Yeah. There's also, I'm just gonna let that comment sit there. They built factories, they made new towns, they made imperial housing. There's a little name drop there. It's very fascinating, and I'm about to sneeze. Because one of the things they do here is they make it very clear that she is very invested in in rebellion. Not in the rebellion, which doesn't exist yet, but in rebellion. And I mentioned that because that's obvious right up the front from her. But as we talk to the team, the heist members, even the Lieutenant Gorn, I caught his name too, as they're talking to them, it becomes apparent that a lot of these people are specifically in this for rebellion. As they talk about the culture that's been systemically being snuffed down, as they talk about they talk about a frickin' festival which happens as people all go around to visit a sacred event, which is kind of a sad thing now because people aren't there, but the event's still there. That's powerful and gets across motive. It also completely distinguishes them from our protagonist, Cassian, who doesn't give a crap about rebellion. Not really. Not yet. So, we cut back to Yennefer and Blevin. Are you denying my request for the second time today? It's so brief. This scene only lasts like 30 seconds. It's a very quick and dirty, and it shows so much the contrast between the two. She is obviously an up-and-comer. She's hungry for it. Blevin is obviously someone who's been here a while. This is just another day in the office for him. And the contrast between the two is fantastic. Then we cut to Vel. They actually specifically name-drop Saw, by the way. It makes so much sense to me, too, that Saw, even in universe, has a rep. Even for these randos on this rando planet, nobody's ever heard of, that Saw Gerrera has a rep for being a brutal, violent person who will literally kill you if you screw up on your own post. Of course he does. That's been Saw's thing, like, this whole time. Yes, Saw was literally a vet of the Clone Wars. He's been fighting the Empire since before they called it that. So, yeah, I know, that tracks. It also makes sense because we need to see someone, or I guess hear someone like Saw, to contrast Luthen, who is our Saw equivalent here. So we see the crew here. People in loose wool outfits, sheep herders and all that, with what I can only refer to as guns. And I want to mention that because this is Star Wars, and blasters look differently than guns. Yeah, I know. There's a lot you can actually talk about the prop design over the years. These are guns. They probably don't actually shoot bullets, but they sure look like they do. They actually have a term for that in Star Wars called slug throwers. But I just wanted to mention that because it's a very clear visual shorthand, right? There's a lot of that going on in this episode. There's a lot of contrast between the people sitting out in the fields with a few sticks and straw for a roof, and then cutting right back to everything else. And there's this wonderfully tense moment as Cassian's approaching. So we've got Skeen, Terramin, Nemik, and Cinta. And yeah, I know that they're AKs in real life because I can identify that. But point being, Terramin, okay, he's the disbeliever. Okay. Nemik, he's the thinker, and obviously the guy who pays attention. Cinta, she's the quiet one and also the medic. I don't have a vibe on Skeen yet. Nothing to go there. Because you'll notice Nemik reaches out immediately. Terramin is the one who has an issue and tries to bring it up multiple times. I know, right, Rex? And Cinta just stares the entire time. Just stares quietly. And this is when that contrast really, really comes into play. Because we're not actually... We cut back to the starport on Coruscant. And we find... At first I thought we were going back to Luthen, having landed, because we just had the transition. We changed into his other persona. But no, we're actually following Deputy Boy. Deputy Karn, I suppose I could start calling him that. The music as he watches the skyline fade away is fascinating, but I have to keep giving praise for the little details. Did you notice? He gets from the starport, which is obviously on the surface, heads over, gets in an elevator, and then slowly goes down, but doesn't go very far down. He only goes down 22 floors. That's it. I'm sorry to bring this up, but whoever he's staying with, his mother in this case, whoever he's staying with, we tell immediately, that's still a topsider. That's still someone who's well off. That's still someone who is well-to-do. The off chance you don't even know that, this is for people who already know, because they don't really demonstrate this properly. But for anybody who doesn't know, the further you are towards the surface, the richer and more powerful you are. That's how that works. That's so demonstrable. Look at freaking Amidala's apartment, her senatorial estate in episode 3, for example. Or hell, look at Mon Mothma's estate in this episode. Yeah, it's extremely stratified. Top to bottom. And of course, I love this because we just covered Clone Wars Season 7, which had the filler arc of crap. But one of the things the filler arc of crap did do properly was that they were so far down one of those pits, you could not see the sky. Yeah. So, mother. So he does apparently just say mother. Slap. Hug. Wonderful acting. In like 3 seconds, we see so much about these two. And they then actually go ahead and leave the narrative for the time being. But wow. So then we cut to the heist team. Oh god, I don't remember act. It's a few trillion. Yeah, there are people in Coruscant who are born and die never seeing the sky. There's this good bit Terramin actually mentions. He's got brass, you can feel it. But this late in the game? And there's also this wonderful bit where Nemik says, I trust him. You know, I'm with him. Nemik just embraces him just like that. Skeen doesn't really say much. He's just thinking about the whole thing. But what I love most about this scene is Vel. Vel's doing so well, by the way. She's carrying so much here. She tries so hard to come across hard to Luthen. Luthen smacked her down pretty hard. Luthen was just like, no, this is how things are going. If this isn't happening, then this isn't happening, and that's fine. But this is happening this way because this is how this is going. Okay. So then she has to then try to go ahead and smack down to the others. She's trying to emulate Luthen's approach. Nowhere near as good at it, by the way, but that makes sense. Of course she isn't. And what I love most is there's several moments where she keeps, like, doing this thing where she'll look at someone and then be like, okay, and then she'll look at someone else and be like, okay. And you can tell she's evaluating. One of the specific things Luthen told her was if you've got a weak point, you identify where and what it is, and you cut them out. That's why we have this backup. And what if it's Cassian? Then you cut him out. He's expendable. And you could see she's evaluating this whole time. trying to figure out who's what and where. Then we see Mon Mothma. I didn't know Mon Mothma was in this. So my first reaction was, what? When she showed up. It makes perfect sense in its weird way, but this is something that Rogue One pulled as well. This is another little trick. Because one of the best ways to establish size, scale, scope, is to contrast it with something else of different size, or scale, or scope. This show has been pulling off that trick constantly, usually visually. But Rogue One did this exact same thing. Darth Vader, one of the highest tier things in the entire setting, was in Rogue One. Briefly. Like a scalpel. But he was there to show the immediate contrast, to demonstrate just how much higher tier he was than all the things we were dealing with in Rogue One. Tarkin, same thing. Tarkin's in what, 2 scenes? So Mothma shows up, and we now have our first legitimate, no really, big fish. What's the third scene? Because there's the scene where he takes things from Krennic, and then there's the scene where he gets Krennic killed, and I don't remember a third scene. I believe you, I don't remember it. It's been a while. I also want to say they brought back Genevieve, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, for Mon Mothma, which was a good choice. Which was really funny is I was staring at her face for a minute. I was like, hang on, I know this woman. And obviously she played Mon Mothma in episode 3 in a deleted scene. And she's played Mon Mothma like ever since. But yeah, that's the first scene, Rax. That's one scene still. So that brings us up to a grand total of 2. There's where he's there for Jeddah, where he takes control of the Death Star from Krennic. And then there's the scene on Scarif, I want to say? God, I actually can't remember the planet names. But it's where he kills Krennic. Anyways, so what's the first scene? Or are you saying one scene is 2 scenes, in which case I withdraw my complaint? I'm losing my train of thought. The first time I ever saw Genevieve, I was looking at her face, I was like, she looks familiar. So I started looking down the list of all kinds of stuff that she's done. And I realized where I've seen her before. She was in The Matrix. More specifically, she was in The Matrix 2 and 3. I just wanted to comment on that briefly, because I cannot believe I recognized her face. She played such a nothing character. She was one of the people on the headset in the control room in Zion. Might have been one of her first roles ever, given how early in her career it was. But anyways, I was wanting to comment on that, because I was like, huh? I'm sorry, getting off topic. Look up here. You know what? Hang on. Give me a second. Gonna make me look this up now. Is it her third role ever? That wouldn't surprise me. There we go. Genevieve O'Reilly. Oh my god, kiddos. Yeah, look up Officer Wirtz. That's W-I-R-T-Z. And then, like, do an image search, and you'll see what I mean. Because she has such a distinct face, right? That's what made me notice immediately. I was like, oh yeah, that's her. Yeah, she's apparently dominantly a television actress, which makes sense. I've actually noticed there's a lot of dominantly television actors in this particular in this thing. Oh yeah, she also plays Moira over in Overwatch, for those of you familiar with that. Anyways, Mon Mothma shows up. And can I just say, they never say this. They never need to say this. But an antiques dealer is the perfect cover for the rebels. No, really think about this for a second. They need to move a lot of money through an area and launder a lot of money. And the artifacts are going to be very, very expensive. Okay. There's a lot of privacy that's inherent to this kind of stuff. You're going to have extended interactions with people over long periods of time. So regular connections. You have to verify the artifacts. You have to make sure you have your regulars, etc. You need contacts with the underworld to get the artifacts. And you need contacts with the rich and elite to sell the artifacts. This is a perfect puzzle piece for the Rebel Alliance. And it really makes me wonder, how did Luthen stumble into this job? Because it feels so wonderfully crafted. Why would you go with laser tech? Yeah, it has to be some kind of laser shot. Yeah, did he stumble into it? Did he create it? Did he start there? Was he someone who actually sold relics and artifacts as a regular format back in the day, back in the time of the Republic? He's old enough. He predates the Clone Wars. And yet he can just excuse himself quickly and for long periods of time without warning, because obviously he's got to get on that thing. He's got to get on that lead. They've got this artifact, this relic to sell him. So, absolutely love that particular puzzle piece there. If you asked me, by the way, obviously he's probably been doing this for a while. If you asked me, I would say what most likely happened was he was one of the rich elite of the Republic. Probably not super fond of them, given his mentality and his approach. Probably, essentially inherited the job from his parents. And as the Republic slowly descended into the Empire in the later days of the Clone Wars, he probably started shifting it a little bit. Oh, God. I tried really hard not to play spot the reference in the background, because there's too many. There's way too many there. I'm actually going to skip over all of them. But honestly, right? Yeah, just... So Mon Mothma shows up. We still haven't gotten past that point. Genevieve's a good actress, and this scene does a really good job of explaining how and why. She does a lot with very, very little screen time here, but it's still more screen time than she's gotten in most of Star Wars to date, and it's really nice to finally see Mothma as an actually interesting character, because she hasn't been since the EU, and I'm just going to say it that way. They have so criminally underutilized Mon Mothma up until stuff like this, and yeah, the Secretary so accurately distracts the guard. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. They don't... Luthen Skarsgård is so perfect here. Everything about his performance is perfectly. Little details, right? Little details about his. He actually puts on his frickin' gloves to handle the merchandise. Of course he does. You don't want to get skin oil on any of those things, right? And the way he handles them, like, you could tell Skarsgård spent some time watching how real antiques dealers will handle precious artifacts, because even the frickin' mace he pulls up, he's still handling it in a way to ensure that he does no damage to it whatsoever, right? Like, very precise holdings with fingers rather than just gripping the whole thing with his hands. There's lovely little details like that. I know exactly who Thor. I'm of the same mind on that. For once, we agree on something. Very minimal contact, and he's just and he's so into it. He's loving and God, his voice sounds different. He actually has a slightly different accent. Did you catch that? It's not one of the, and that's the other thing. Usually, when you hear, hang on one sec, let me demonstrate this. Usually, when an actor has to use a different accent to like have a role or pretend to be someone, the accent they go through is so substantially different that in many cases it can't even believe that it's this coming from the same mouth of the same person. Completely changes everything they're saying and talking about. But in this case, the variance... Let me try to say this more clearly, because it's actually hard for me to do. The variance in how Skarsgård talks is so minute and so distinct that in many cases you probably wouldn't even notice that I just started shifting how I'm speaking in the middle of this very sentence that I'm saying right now. It's just a tiny shift, but it's there. And yeah, it's just a subtle Coruscant-y accent. It's not quite what's usually referred to as in universe as the Imperial accent, which is received pronunciation, aka British. But God, that's fantastic the way they do that. Now, one moment. I need to say thank you to Sonoshi. That will go towards Dragon Age 4, Witcher 3, and Dealer's Choice. Thank you very, very much, Sonoshi. And yeah, sorry, you mentioned that earlier. It bears repeating out loud. Luthen was a student of history. I mean, first of all, he knows about the Reccontants, but second of all, more importantly, of course, I'm trying really hard not to get into real-life politics here. So all I'm going to say is anybody who has really studied history can notice signs and patterns. Moving on. So, everything about his performance is fantastic. And there's this wonderful, wonderful tidbit. They go back and they talk about things. Mothma wants to bring in a person. Doesn't say who. Which makes sense, actually. And there's this wonderful tidbit. They say it out loud, but still the implication is just there. It seems like there's a new spy in the Senate every day. I go to the bank and it's all new faces. And his response to that is, you got a new driver. And she doesn't actually react to that audibly, just visibly. And there is this absolutely wonderful moment. There's this such a wonderful moment where Luthen, I know, Luthen is coming back, and off camera, he's not visible, but we can hear Skarsgård off camera switch back to his slightly different voice and slightly different way of speaking, and I hope this will be acceptable for you and y'alls, because obviously they've been there too long, so we need to get back into that. And of course, she visibly changes. You can see the switch being pressed as she switches from her real self to her public persona. Just chunk like that, right? And she physically showcases it. I love the facial acting in the show so much. And her dialogue here is fantastic. Can I just say that this is the leader of the Rebel Alliance? For probably the first time since the books of the EU, this is the leader of the Rebel Alliance. A senator who faces daily danger, who is capable and competent because she has to be, because anything less would be insufficient. She would simply fail, like so many of her contemporaries did. This is someone who drives even Luthen to bow to her. Metaphorically, of course. And his response, it's a daring choice, but I trust you'll have the courage to turn back if it should be too much. Okay, we'll back your play. Damn. And of course, she actually does buy the artifact. Why not? She needs to get more money to him, after all. And yeah, I did notice. I noticed the suit bit. Oh my god. God, yes! More! Please! Can we have a political thriller set in Star Wars? I've been wanting that for like 30 years now. So we do a quick switch. Because now we meet Lieutenant Gorn. I immediately like Lieutenant Gorn. Like that. It is shocking how much he made me like his character in literal seconds. He shows up and he's just like, oh, what is this? What is this nonsense? Now, at this point, you didn't tell me. Oh my god, okay. And there's this wonderful bit where he said, you should have kept me on the loop. And her response is, on that we agree. And you obviously what she's really saying is that she's pissed that she wasn't kept in a loop, and she would have kept him on a loop if she could have. He takes that as her admitting wrong. Like, okay, you're right, I should have kept you in a loop. And he accepts that. Did you notice that? In fact, can I just say that Gorn, I hope Gorn's not a traitor. I really do. Because he's so much more observant than any of these other guys. Did you catch that too? Check this out. There's this bit where he approaches Cassian. And he talks to Cassian. And there's this wonderful bit. He's very brusque about it. But the way he says it conveys everything. I'm not comfortable with my neck being in a stranger's hands. And Cassian's response was, yeah, ditto. And Gorn's like, okay. And he accepts that. It's really subtle, but he's just like, okay. And he shifts off of that immediately and moves to his next complaint. In that one moment, Cassian just went through an interview. Yeah, of course he's observant. He's a freaking inside guy. So, that's true. That's true. You got me there, 040. He is technically a traitor. Then we shift back to Mothma. and her home. Oh my God. I wish I could just pause the screen on her house and just talk about it for like 10 or 15 minutes. The set design on her place is crazy. First of all, obviously she's up top. She's at the surface. In fact, she's so at the surface, she has a freaking skyline that she can see out her window. Second of all, white. Let me tell you a little, let me get across a little bit of a thing for those of you not aware. White is hard to clean. White is frustrating and irritating to clean. Like, I don't know the physics of why. All I know is that I've been doing cleaning and janitorial work for the better part of, like, 36 years, something like that. I think it's up. No, 34 years, excuse me. White, hard to clean. White. Everything is white. Her floors are white marble. Her walls are white, like plastic and plaster. Her ceiling is white. And it's all pristine and clean. She has these freaking, I forget what they're called, the miniature trees. Multiple of them. There's gold lanterns on the walls portraying distributed light against the white walls. But hang on, it actually gets worse than this. This actually is so even worse because there's detailing. I'm explaining this so badly. Do you see this wall right here? Is this visible on camera? It is not. We'll use here, okay? So this is white wall. It's actually eggshell, but whatever. This is a white wall. So cleaning this would be kind of irritating, but ultimately something that I could do, right? Because it's a flat surface. How many flat surfaces were in Mon Mothma's apartment? Because you had details. Like there was a freaking mesh thing, like forming. I don't know words. I don't have vocabulary. There's like a mesh thing in the middle of her room, which in order to clean that, you'd have to actually go through every single hole with like a freaking duster like this. Every single hole, one by one, over and over and over. The walls have lines and inlays and detailing on them. This place is screaming wealth. Yeah, it's just the embossments are everywhere. It's absolutely insane. And yeah, she almost has to have people doing that because most droids don't have the precision necessary. And just, they probably go through on a regular basis, probably daily, to keep this place clean and upkept and proper. And this is like 2 rooms that we see. What's the rest of her mansion look like? But of course that all makes sense. First of all, Mon Mothma is someone who comes from tremendous wealth. She is a senator who has been a career senator since the time of the Clone Wars. Second of all, she needs that tremendous wealth to be able to funnel it into the places it needs to go as part of her desire to build the Rebel Alliance. Third of all, she needs to look like she's a corrupt senator. She needs to look like every other complacent, frickin' goddamned, drowning in wealth senator that fills that Senate floor. Otherwise, people will be like, She's also literally a noble. She has to maintain this level of wealth. I like to think this is definitely pulling from her EU persona here, and I don't know much about the AU Mothma. I know a little bit. I have to feel that Mon Mothma hates this. Hates it. Wakes up every day and just... you know? I bet a lot of you do actually know what that feels like when you wake up and you just look around your room and you just go... And then she goes to meet her husband. Yeah, so her husband is... So obviously he's setting dinner. Yeah, her husband obviously loves it, but hang on, hang on. I actually want to talk about her husband, but I'm going to leave that until we discuss the scene. First of all, Ars Dangor is being invited to the table. They even name drop him. For those of you who don't catch that name, that's one of the advisors. For those of you who don't know about the political structure of the Galactic Empire, Palpatine did this thing. Yeah, Sly Moore was there too. Palpatine did this thing where he wanted more and more people directly reporting to him, who would then be in charge of the various aspects of the Galactic Empire. So the entire purpose behind the Grand Moffs was to bring the local government, the regional government, more directly under his control. This is actually something that's name dropped in A New Hope, but that's where the Grand Moff system actually came from. The Grand Admiralty, something discussed more in the Thrawn trilogy, but also brought up in several works of the EU. The Grand Admiralty was something that was the same thing. He wanted the Grand Admirals to report to only one person, him, and the Grand Admirals had broad jurisdiction over the military. The advisors were the part of that took over the bureaucracy, the internal bureaucracy side of things. So it's Palpatine, and then Grand Admirals, Grand Moffs, and the advisors, and then the three of those branch out to everything else. It's also worth noting that all three of these are constantly infighting amongst each other, too. So that's the advisors. They're way the hell up there. Personal advisors to Emperor Palpatine are being invited to Mon Mothma's table. Please think about that for 5 seconds. But it actually gets worse than that for a second. Because there's this wonderful bit where her husband says, old friends. Now, he might not specifically be talking about these people, because it's a decent guest list. That's a hell of a spread. But old friends? Her reaction, even if you don't know the names, even if you don't know who Ars Dangor is or who the advisory board is, her reaction makes all of this extremely, perfectly clear. And I just have to point out one tiny little thing. Have you looked at her hair? I know this is a weird thing to point out, but I love these kind of visual contrasting details. Her hair is very well kept, but also simple. She has a fairly standard haircut. I mean, my sister could have that haircut if she wanted to. It's the kind of thing that only take a few minutes to really set up, and she obviously takes good care of it. His is not. He's got this stupid, stylized thing with like this little ponytail in the back that probably takes him several minutes every day just to set up that one little knot. And he's got this whole thing going on. Even their outfits. Hers is actually fairly crisp and professional. His is like loungewear for the rich. He looks like bored rich. A lot of effort was put into his movements, into his costume, into his hairstyle to showcase the kind of man he is. Yeah, he looks like a Nepo baby. He really does. He probably is, actually. Yeah, bourgeois and unkempt at the same time. It's fantastic. Oh, yeah, sorry. He, of course, wouldn't touch his own hair. You never cuff the coif, right? Pouring rich. God damn! And what Huthor's saying in chat is the thing that I wanted to say last. Because everything about him screams this rich snob. But then, as she leaves, he says a quote, and that stuck with me. Must everything be boring and sad? I don't even know where to begin unpacking that. This one scene, that one bit of dialogue, indicates so much. I know this is going to sound absolutely insane, but this man is a victim. No, I'm serious. This man is doing something. It's very, very clear. This man is someone who sees, to some extent or another, how awful everything is. He portrays just a tiny little tidbit in the back of his portrayal, in the back of his dialogue, that things are bad, and he's kind of... he's doing this. Right? He is conditioned by environment and circumstance to block it out as hard as he possibly can. So he brings a bunch of old friends to just have fun at the table and enjoy dinner. And he knows he's doing it. Like, there's so much apathy bleeding out from him. I'm not saying he's completely blameless, obviously. But you can see how this person is absolutely someone crafted by his environment. And what we see in this person is exactly what Palpatine wants his own rich elite to be. Really. What most, tyrannical dictators want their rich elite to be. They want them to be complacent, they want them to be complicit, and they want them to just go have fun and spend their money on their stupid things and not be a problem. He's an ideal citizen. From a certain point of view. And yeah, there's this wonderful bit where Mon Mothma attacks him by talking about the starving people. And he tries to shut that down hard. Doesn't even want to think about it. Doesn't even want to deal with that. Well, that's exactly why you want your rich elite to be so complacent, Magister. The rich elite can be a problem, after all. The rich elite can cause lots of problems. Look up the reign of Justinian sometime over in the Byzantine Empire. Half his career was spent dealing with the rich elite and trying to keep them under heel. Or about how about half the empires under the Persians or the Assyrians. And yeah, also mention of the Gormans. Got to mention that tiny little tidbit there. So, very quick and dirty thing. There's this tidbit where... yeah, it's technically Kira noise. There's a very quick and dirty thing where Gorn quizzes Cassian in a way that can only be referred to as a trap. We've cut back to the heist. Cassian immediately and effortlessly passes. This is like the second time Gorn has quizzed him now. And I have to comment on it. Cassian looks at the thing, identifies the type of freighter, and gives a very casual but familiar reaction to how it is to fly that kind of fighter. The camera cuts back to Gorn for just a second, so Gorn can have just another little visible reaction, because Cassian just passed his second test. God, I love Gorn immediately. It's so great. And then there's this bit where Gorn actually discusses the celestial event that they're referencing, that they're going to be doing this heist during, and why they're on a time window. Okay. But the way Gorn discusses it, you can feel just a few hints of why he's doing this. I'm like, God, I hope he's not a traitor. Because you can feel it, right? You can feel how he describes it. He doesn't describe it mechanically. He doesn't describe it literally. That's what Nemec does. No, he describes it as if it's a poem. He uses flowery language. He uses invocative language to describe this thing. Yeah, he hoips it up. Hope we see it on camera. He clearly is into this, and I find myself wondering, there's so much implication in just how he talks about this cultural event. So they open up about the plan to Cassian. And then they ask, "Are you in?" Nice touch, as weird as that sounds. Because it makes it too often, this kind of a heist team is too unforgiving, too rigid, too unpleasant, and frankly unreasonable. Instead, they open up the plan, give him the layout, and then say, "Okay, are you in?" So he doesn't have to walk in and blindly accept it. So Cassian takes a few seconds to think about it, and then says, "Yeah." And he's in. His Huthor asks, if I had to guess, what do I think his history is? He's young enough that he feels like someone who didn't really join the Imperial military until post-Clone Wars. Age is such an important thing when it comes to discussing stuff in this era, because I know that sounds like a strange statement, but you have to understand how many people were around for the Clone Wars is kind of significant for their backstories, right? At best, he would have been a child during the Clone Wars. That means he was functionally developing and growing up and forming his career during the age of the Galactic Empire. Why is this relevant? This is probably one of the only career paths that was available to him. This is actually a very common trick that a lot of regimes use, and the Galactic Empire absolutely does this. They do a thing where you go ahead and you can live a terrible, squalid life, you can work in hard labor, or you can join the military. And hey, if you join the military, you get these perks, you get this money, and you get this other thing. Plug, 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 plug. So he probably joined the military and didn't really think too much about it, and then came here and then destroyed people's culture. And that probably bothered him. And that's what I think is going on here. That I think that, yeah, Luke, a lot of people tend to forget this. Luke wanted to join the Imperial Academy back in A New Hope. So, I think that's exactly what happened, that he has spent 7 years amongst the locals, and he has, and I don't mean this in any way as an unkind thing, gone a bit native. He thinks it is unfortunate and unacceptable that his superiors are absolutely okay with, in like the most complacent and uncaring way possible, just casually destroying these people's culture. That's my thought. Then we have 2 scenes right at the end here. First, we cut back to the ISB. There's this little tidbit. This is actually why I have the draft up here. Because the ISB, obviously none of this is canon anymore. But the ISB, which is of course a part of Compnor, has several organizations under it. These are Internal Affairs, Re-education, Enforcement, Surveillance, Investigations, and Interrogation. There's also the Committee for Preservation, but we don't talk about them. I bring up all of this because they never actually say what bureau they're in. They only say one little tidbit about what bureau she's from, that she's from Enforcement, and that she's obviously very, very driven. Based on how they're operating and what they're doing, this is probably Surveillance or Investigations. The Imperial Security Bureau, Czar, which is under Compnor, which itself stands for the Commission for the Preservation of the New Order. I have spent entirely too much time studying these stupid tech manuals and political diagrams, because of course I frickin' have. So, yeah, and it's also worth noting, and this is actually doubly funny, even in amongst Compnor's divisions, there's something called SecOff, or Sector Office. And each sector office then has its own divisions for dealing with certain things within those sectors. And I only point that out because that seems to be true how this is working as well. Each individual person has their own staff and their own office, which is dealing with a certain number of sectors. So most of the structure from the book I'm staring at right now seems to be carrying forward from the EU, because it's pretty structural here, yeah. But anyways, excuse me. I just find myself wondering, because they're not Internal Affairs, they're not Re-education, and they're not Enforcement. Those are the only 3 we know they're not. That only leaves 3 divisions: Surveillance, Investigations, or Interrogation. I really do find myself wondering exactly which division they are. I wonder if they'll actually give that away, or if it even matters in the future. Forgive me for the digression, because the next thing that matters, which is much more important. Yes, I did notice that, Rex. He is very much the Nicholas Meyer of Star Wars. So, oh god, I've already forgotten how to pronounce his name. It's been an hour. It's been an hour and 23 minutes. I have been talking too long. Radegard? God, what was his name? The Major, the director. Bob shows up. And Partagaz, thank you. Partagaz shows up. What's the first thing he says? Speak! That's it. Very efficient. He's even, as he's walking in with a very hurried bit of body language, speak! And you can just tell he does not want to deal with this, and he's got stuff to do. Get on with it. And so Blevin and Yennefer Lady both argue back and forth for a bit and do a pretty bad job of it. I also love the tidbit where Partagaz actually says this looks like a straight-up case of robbery case gone awry, which is hysterical considering it totally is! He is once again right without any real intention. He also then, he rules in favor of Blevin, for lack of a better way to put it, dismisses Blevin, and then turns to her and gives her a weirdly inspiring speech. After chastising her, that man over there has tripled your workload and has already completed it. So get on with it. But the thing about it is I hate this man. I hate this man with a vibrant passion, because Partagaz is the reason why the Galactic Empire was as successful as it was. He is competent. He is capable. He is disturbingly reasonable. This is terrifying. And it is exactly why the organizations like this are able to exist and indeed thrive. This then cuts over to Cassian. Yeah, no kidding, Bionic Bunk. Cassian is given the med thing. It's like, all right, look, here's the ship, here's the area, here's the thing. You got to deal with this, right? You got to deal with this. And Cassian's face, as the episode finally closes out, shows how much he knows he has jumped up a whole weight class. And his expression makes it clear that he's probably not sure he wants to be up there yet. Cut to credits. And that's the episode. What do we all think about how this one rates? Purple is the highest, Czar. Purple is the exceptional. Red is excellent. I do agree. I have to once again remind the crowd that red is a very, very high score. And I think I will agree that this is red. A high red, but a red nonetheless. Almost all of this is setup. But that's okay. Because it's really, really good setup. We've got pieces moving for Luthen and Mon Mothma and Deputy Boy. We've got the ISB lady, Yennefer. Cassian, the heist. Let's see if I can remember their names. We got Skeen, Tamarin, Nemec, Cinta, Vel, and Gorn. I think I got all that off the top of my head. And yeah, if the payoff is as strong as the setup, it will almost guaranteed be a purple. I think the pacing is excellent, yes. You'll notice this is also a much longer episode than most of the previous ones. This was like 42 minutes, I wanted to say. Hang on. Oh, hang on, let me rewind back to episode 4 here. No, rewind. Jesus Christ, I hate their front end. I was right, 43 minutes. 43 minutes. The other colors, click the links are. But if you don't want to click the link because you hate me, that's okay. I don't blame you for hating me. After all, I do study fictional history as well as real life history. And the answer is actually very simple. It goes black, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, purple, down to up. I should mention I haven't had breakfast yet because of sleeping issues. So I'm going to go ahead and be a little bit more delayed on coming back for the next episode than usual. So I'm going to go make lunch at this point. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remember the next episode, which is Season 1, Episode 5, The Axe Forgets.